Thank you. We're now live?
We are, yeah. Over to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, and welcome everybody to this meeting of the Environment Select Committee. I'm Councillor Will Pascal, and I'm the chair of this Select Committee. This meeting is being held in accordance with the recent government regulations on holding virtual meetings. With us if we run into some technical challenges during the meeting. In line with government guidance that everybody should stay at home as much as possible, this meeting is being held by Microsoft Teams, live conferencing, and all the committee members, council officers and the parties who wish to participate in this hearing are joining from remote locations. The event is also being streamed live, and members of the public and the media are welcome to follow the meeting remotely and listen to the discussions taking place. I would like to welcome any first-time viewers or listeners to the Environment Select Committee. To commence, please would you join me before we start with 72 seconds of silence to remember those who sadly lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So this evening we have a very full agenda, but before we start, I would ask members of the committee to mute their microphones and only to unmute themselves when they're speaking. And also also if they could switch off, if everybody can switch off their videos as well. I'm afraid we have had problems in the past with bandwidth at various locations, which has interrupted meetings. If a councillor wishes to speak, or if, could they please put a letter Q in the chat column, and please could nobody use the chat column for anything other than that purpose, because we will be showing this live, and if anybody puts anything else in the chat column, that will be there for the record and for anybody to view there afterwards. To assist fellow councillors and officers of the member of the public watching online to identify you, before you speak, please could you state your name and your affiliation. If for any reason your connection drops out and you miss something, please can you let us know? Basically put up your hand and we will come back to you. And if my connection drops, I nominate as chair, Councillor Charles O'Connor, who's vice chair, to take over this meeting. Now, the first thing we have to do is to confirm attendance of the committee members and declarations of interest. And basically, I confirm that I have no declarations of interest to make in regard of any of the items on the agenda. And I will now ask each member in turn, one by one, if they're present and whether they have any interest to declare. Councillor Charles O'Connor.
Present and no interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Arian Aretti.
Thank you, Chair. No interest to declare. Thanks.
Councillor Marwan El Nagi. Councillor Anagi? I think we need to, if somebody could give him a call on a mobile, that would be.
Good evening, Chair.
Good. Good to hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm present and nothing to declare.
Well, I'm also glad that you're here and you're obviously well and so on. So welcome.
Thank you,
Councillor Alison Jackson.
Present and no interest to declare.
Thank you very much. Councillor Laura Round. I think we were warned that she may be late because of being on a tube delayed. If officers could remind me when she appears, I will have to ask her that question when she appears. Councillor Portia Thaxter.
President Chair, no declaration of interest.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. Apart from Laura Round sending apologies for possibly being late due to a tube delay, we've had no apologies for absence in advance. The minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of July, are there any items which, first of all, are people happy to, are committee members happy to accept the record that has been published as an accurate record of the meeting? And then secondly, are there any questions that are not on the agenda and have not been dealt with in between that anybody on the committee would like to bring forward now? I'll take silence as an okay. So I will take it then that the minutes of the meeting on the 6th of July are accepted and accurate, and that all items of action have either been dealt with or have come up on the agenda for updates this time round. Thank you very much. We've dealt with declarations of interest, and therefore we move to environmental sustainability strategy, paper A4. Now, the way we organise these meetings is to assume that everybody on the committee and those coming to the meeting have read the papers as circulated and published on the council website, and therefore we don't read them out in full. But what we asked for is a short introduction, and then for first of all committee members to make questions, and then after that we go to anybody who wishes to speak outside. So who's let Mr. Traherne know. At the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on Thursday, environmental sustainability and the delivery of the 2030 carbon neutral commitment by the Council was confirmed as one of the three main topics allocated to this committee. We return to those working arrangements under A12. I have continued to attend the meetings of the Environmental Sustainability Strategic Board and had various briefings on particular aspects of that, and would like to thank the officers for involving me in those. I now call upon the lead member, Councillor Kamali, and Officer Terry Oliver to speak on item 4.
Thank you, Chair. Well, yes, as you have before you, it's an update on our sustainability strategy. This is clearly a work in progress, one that we're obviously tackling with gusto. We have an awful lot of work to get through. What I would say is that the strategy board so far has been successful in bringing together green champions from every department, and it's also started pulling together all the various strategies that we already had. At last count, I believe we had 17 environmental strategies, and they now all sit within the board's remit, and obviously we have to progress each of them. The board itself has established their 5 key council, which are obviously to improve air quality, reduce our carbon emissions, improve biodiversity, tackle fuel poverty, and also to minimize waste. And work is ongoing. I'm happy to answer questions, but the document, I hope, speaks for itself. It's quite detailed, and there's an awful lot going on at the moment.
Now, have we got anybody who would like from the committee who'd like to ask a question? I don't have any. Alison Jackson.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to just ask a couple of questions about you saying 410, the 52% that you've made progress on the carbon emissions. What does that include, and what targets? I mean, how much further do you have to decrease in order to hit the council targets for 2030 and also 2040? You know, which includes everybody.
Absolutely. So initially we had an air quality climate change action plan, which ran from 2016 to April 21. The strategy you're looking at is obviously our plan for 21 onwards that will take us through the 2030 and the 2040 target. Our previous target was based on a 2008-2007 baseline. It didn't include council housing because at the time they weren't within scope, but we were able to reduce carbon emissions by 52% on that target, sort of exceeding the target we'd aimed for. As it stands today, we have reduced down to 770 kilotons of CO2. It works out to something of around 5 tons per resident, and we need to get that down to zero, obviously, by 2040. And we have our own council emissions, which are being calculated by the new consultant that we're appointing. They'll be working over the winter to work out exactly what our emissions are, and then obviously give us options as to how to address that. But I think Terry might have more specific data on that one.
Thanks, Jem. You covered it extremely well. So not much to add there, but as you said, the 52% target was based on council operations, not including housing, and it was on the 2007-2008 baseline. So we actually set ourselves a 40% target, so we overachieved that. So that was a lot of the quick wins. Now we've got the really tough job of trying to be carbon neutral as a council by 2030 and carbon neutral as a borough by 2040. And as Jem said, and the second part of the paper is about a consultant that has just been commissioned. I think you were sent their brief as well, and how they're going to do that. So there's 3 phases where we've got building the kind of evidence base and looking at the scope of that work, then looking at the actual routes we can take and what options and scenarios we've got to become carbon neutral and the kind of pace we need to put behind that. And then it's kind of a benefit analysis that we've got to look at those different options and see what's best for us. So it's going to be a pretty tough journey to reach those targets. But we're kind of up for the challenge, and we've got to work with the whole council and everyone in the borough to achieve those results.
Charles O'Connor, you have a question.
Yes, thank you very much. I am pleased to see some references to trees in the increasing biodiversity section. I just wondered whether there ought to be more references and more explanation of how we're going to maintain our existing stock of trees and prevent them being cut down, because it's one of the things I'm most constantly and most frequently lobbied about by residents.
Well, yeah, Terry, is that for you?
Yeah, I'm happy. No, it's a really, really good point. So what we're doing with the environmental sustainability strategy is pulling together all the existing kind of strategies and policies that the council has around environmental sustainability and pulling it under those kind of 5 headings or what we feel are the 5 priorities. So it is air quality, improving air quality, reducing our carbon emissions and tackling climate change, increasing and improving biodiversity, tackling fuel poverty and minimising waste. And so each one of those priorities will have a really detailed action plan and work stream under that. And we're in the process over the next few months of producing the new biodiversity action plan. So I think that needs to be within that as well. So, and we're working with the arboricultural team in planning to make sure that kind of we maximise the amount of street trees and the existing trees are maintained where possible.
Yeah, I think that's key because we've got such a brilliant existing resource and we don't want to lose it because it takes an awful lot of time to get back to where we were.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry. If I could pop a couple of questions. First of all, I'd like to apologise to those of you who were sent paper copies which were not collated properly, and that you had to refer back to the website, which was an accurate set of papers. I'd also, whilst it has been addressed now, particularly Terry's mentioned the word pace. I think both in our last meeting and also when I went to the Environment Sustainability Board, I did draw attention to the fact that the original commitment from last year, a 10-year plan, we've gone through a year so far, and by the time we have the consultants report, can start actioning things. To go. I would say though, the experience of going.
We're losing you. We're losing you. We can't hear what you're saying, Will.
Okay. And a machine.
So, Will, can you talk now? Is your connection there?
I'm logging on a different machine.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah.
Tom, are you there?
I am, yeah. So Councillor Pascal will be able to join on a different machine. I don't know if in his absence, Councillor O'Connor, if you wanted to sort of continue the discussion. Oh, he's already in.
He's back on different. Well, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there's a bit of feedback on the line.
Yeah, just turn the other machine off now. Okay, can you hear me now?
Back to you.
Good. Okay, is that clear, everybody?
Yeah.
Good. I apologise for that.
It's very clear.
Okay, let's go back to where I was. What I was trying to say was that I think pace has been picked up by the Environment Sustainability Strategic Board, but also in the report here, because the word has been mentioned. The fact that the housing was not in.
Oh dear, we've lost him again. Have other people lost him? Tom, have you lost him?
Yes.
I have.
Time for you to save the day, Charlie.
Find my agenda. Right. Let's give it a minute or two, just in case Will's able to get back in. Otherwise, I can take over until he sorts it out.
Charlie, I believe Councillor Pascal was talking about pace of our ambition. I think whilst we've got some dead air, I should say that obviously the air quality climate change action plan expires in April 21, with the intention that the new document obviously sits after that. So whilst we have made the declaration over a year ago, the work itself was always intended to culminate in April. Obviously, a huge factor in bringing down our emissions is the emissions coming into the national grid. And I think over the summer we went back to something the 1850s in the amount of coal. And hopefully, if we can keep coal free, it should make a very large impact on the emissions within the borough. But I'll wait for Will now. Let's see.
As there is dead air, just to say, Councillor Round has emerged out of a tube, and I'm with you now.
Oh, hello, Laura. Thank you very much. Will wanted to ask you whether you had any declarations of interest.
None.
Brilliant.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. If we could just record that, Tom. Thank you. Let me just see. I'm just going to call Will very quickly. Here we go. I understand I've just been sent an email. Sorry, we're just going to have to pause while I pick up the email from our officers.
I'm just going to pause the live stream now, so we're not going to be live while we sort out the connection issues, if that's all right.
Very sensible. Thank you very much.
That's very good. Thank you very much.
We're back live now, Chair.
Okay. I apologise to everybody who's listening to this. I've had a system failure and had to switch to a different system. Now, the question that I was asking at the time that I disappeared, I think I got as far as asking the question about pace, and I believe that Jem has answered that. And I think I've recognised also that the pace is definitely picking up. So I think we can pass on from that. The two particular questions I did want to ask was that in the Environment Sustainability Strategy paper that's been circulated, I think under the vision, these sort of blue blobs, the one that says reduce carbon emissions and address climate change should be address carbon zero, not reduce carbon. And the other thing is that under the priority 2, 1920 chart, which is a few pages in, my question is as to whether council property includes the council housing stock or not.
Terry, do you want to answer that? Otherwise, I'm happy to.
Go for it, Jem, if you want. But it should include the housing.
Yes. So on a matter of branding, obviously it's still a draft document. I am very keen that we label this all under the Vision Carbon Zero. And yes, we are including the council property, and in fact, working with Lanc West, they themselves have set themselves a target to be a net zero estate by 2030 as well, and they're probably further ahead than all of us.
I mean, the thing that would be very useful would be to have a few more numbers in this report, because it's got a chart here which says council property 41% of in-house carbon emissions by source 1920 RBKC. And I'm not sure that includes the housing, because you've got 10,000 housing units there. So I would have thought that it would have grown a bit more than that from last time. But if that can be confirmed outside the meeting, I'd be most grateful. Anyway, that's my questions. And we've had questions from councillors on the committee. Unless there are any other councillors on the committee who'd like to ask a question, perhaps James Thompson, you are, I believe, on the line. Do you want to ask a question?
You're muted,
What
Mr.
are the
Thompson.
councillors state?
James, I think you're muted. Maybe we could.
No question. Sorry, I was just simply saying I'm waiting for the next item, but listening intently.
I do. I've got a question. What other housing associate estates have you identified in the north of the borough to adopt the same model as you're working with now in Lancaster West Estate?
Thanks, Portia. Well, we've got to get all of our housing down to zero, so it's every single property, north and south. Obviously, Lankwest had their own team in-house working away, and they've been doing an awful lot of it sort of directly, finding available grants and things like that themselves. I think they're setting a really good example of how to do it, and we're keen to work all together because there's lots of good examples of how to do things borough-wide.
Thank you very much.
When it comes to, but I also think that we should take, yeah, thank you.
Okay, just to clarify, Portia, we will be looking at the whole of RBKC's own social housing stock as part of our 2030 focus. And that will certainly be part of joint working we'll come on to later with the Housing and Communities Select Committee.
Thank you.
Right. I think, therefore, if we have asked all the questions we want to, is there anybody else who wants to ask a question under this item? Let's move on to our next item, which is A5. A5 is the government white paper on planning, and this concerns the council's response to the government's consultation on proposals to overhaul the planning system. The leadership team approved the response in principle when it met last week on Thursday, the 8th of October, but it also passed an amendment to the KD that they approved at that time, which specifically set out a window of opportunity for other comments to be made on that response, and that's why we have brought it to the table tonight. Any comments back to the to Johnny Thalassides or the planning team have to be made before 9 a.m. on Monday, the 26th of October, or probably a better way of putting it is by close of play on the Sunday, and before that, if possible. So we are going to ask Johnny Thalassides, Councillor Johnny Thalassides, and John Wade to speak to run us through the key points on what is a complicated subject of great import to the borough. And then I'm going to ask the Kensington Society and the Chelsea Society to make a contribution, which they pre-booked in. And then we will ask questions from the committee, and then we will go to any other participants who wish to ask a question. So Johnny Thalassides, Councillor Johnny Thalassides and John Wade, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, thanks, Will. So I did speak about the white paper at our leadership team meeting last week, but for those who weren't following that, this is obviously our response. I think we always try to support the national government as much as we can. We certainly support many of their aspirations to produce more safe, secure and affordable new homes in the borough. We're also very enthusiastic about more digital plan making and the opportunity to consult more online, as well as the traditional forms of engagement, of course. But we do outline a number of concerns. And whilst in our executive summary, I think at leadership last week, there were 3 principal ones. There are more too, and I'm sure they'll be discussed tonight. One is, of course, the housing targets that have been mooted, which I think would be completely unacceptable for the borough, and we will seek to resist if it's anything like more than 3,000 homes per year. Another is around the lack of community involvement suggested in the white paper. We know that there are better outcomes in planning when we speak to our great amenity societies and our resident associations. They're the people who know our areas best. And we want them to have a role to engage in the planning process, not only at the local plan or master planning stage, but also right throughout, from sort of vision to decision, as it were. And I think the third major plank of concern that we had was about development management policies. That particularly relates, I think, especially even in Chelsea, to mega basements, which, as a resident of Chelsea, I'm very sensitive to indeed. That the council will resist any reintroduction of these sorts of subterranean structures. Can I also, whilst I'm introducing this item, just thank the Kensington Society and the Chelsea Society for the work that they do. I'm very grateful for the opportunity for them to avail us of their views tonight, and I'm happy to discuss further with them after this meeting so that we can make sure that our response as a council is as strong as possible. I know that they always offer a great deal of insight.
Okay, John Wade, is there anything you'd like to add in terms of any detail? Or are we happy to move forward?
No, I don't think so, Councillor Pascal. We can always answer more detailed questions when they arise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amanda Frame, would you like to speak for the Kensington Society?
I'm trying to unmute. Sorry. You can probably see me, but can't unmute me.
True. We've got your visual. We still need your sound.
Amanda, you are muted. Unmuted. Okay, that's fine.
I'm trying.
Amanda.
Yes, I know.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
You're muted again. No, you're not.
No. Okay, I'm unmuted. Thank you. Okay, sorry about that. The two papers that the government has produced, the changes to the current planning system, the planning department submitted a brief statement, or not brief, but a concise statement outlining the problems that particular paper produced would cause us on the 1st of October. The current one, the white paper, planning for the future, is due in, as Will said, the 29th of October. John Wade and Prete have produced an excellent paper. However, there were a few points that we thought needed to be brought up, and we will be doing that actually hopefully next week, depending on a few other papers that have to be commented on. The government is really, in terms of what they are proposing, something that would radically change London, and particularly Kensington. There is no way that we can make the numbers that they are requiring unless we do major demolition to many parts of our borough. I gave Johnny an example the other day of, if you all know Woodford Square. Woodford Square is 121 houses. It was taken from 5 villas on Abbotsbury Road. That's the type of thing, but more, we would be looking for to reach these numbers. So it's very, very frightful. And what we like to do is add to the paper our emphasis on terms of how frightful and actually radically changing this proposal is to us. Now, Michael is along here. Michael has done an outline of some of the aspects of it. So, Michael, if you would just briefly state the challenges and the opportunities.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I certainly can.
Oh, good. Let me echo what Amanda said. We were very pleased with the paper that was produced. There's one aspect that it's actually the first of our priorities in the current plan, which is keeping life local. And I think that's one of the things that really does need building up. Well, what I've tried to do is, or we've tried to do, is to produce something that's not a review of the white paper as such, but looking at the challenges and opportunities it presents in preparing our own local plan. I think the challenges are, if the government wants to reduce the size and content of the plan, but they appear to have no mention of the need for a vision and a strategy. Now, that it doesn't matter. It's an omission on their part, and it can't stop you from producing that. Likewise, it doesn't really, it just talks about developing sites rather than maintaining or creating better places. And really, all it does is say, pick the sites, do some design codes, that's not really about placemaking, and nor is it a strategy. It concentrates on zoning, which is a very fragmented approach, and it loses sight of the vision. Why are we doing it, rather than here's a site to develop? And it should be really a question, yes, we're developing these sites, but it's for the purpose of implementing the vision. Wall-to-wall zoning is not a strategy. At most, it's just a reflection of who lobbied hardest at the call for site stages. It also appears to involve a loss of most of our policies, which are closely tailored to our unique conditions. And I think maybe we need to turn it round and look at things differently. Not that we're trying to stop things, but saying these are the things that we're trying to promote in order to deliver the vision. And so the policies could become much more positive. If I can just scroll down, I'm sorry, I've got it in front of me. I mentioned the issue of protecting and retaining social and community uses, which is a central part of keeping life local. But turning the policy round and making that the second half, you would actually think in terms of how do we create the communities that we want, and how can we make sure they have all the social and community uses they need? And so it's really a question of trying to create a positive policy out of it. And certainly when answering the questions in the questionnaire, we'd certainly like to say keeping life local as one of the answers. The problem with the proposal, it appears that the proposals for affordable housing in SIL would inevitably result in the reduction of affordable housing, because it's going to be deferred until after the development, while you're still squabbling about how much money you're going to get. And very often the things that you want, particularly affordable housing, but also other things, you have to wait until completion before you can even get the money to do the things. So actually it's deferring everything into the future, and where you might choose to try and borrow money to do things yourselves, it puts you at financial risk. And I think most of all, it alienates the community who are expecting simultaneous delivery of many of these things. I think the final one is it appears to accept that estate renewal is a prime candidate in the renewal category. And I think that's unacceptable in this borough with its history. Looking now at the opportunities, it identifies town centres as a category within the renewal zones, which provides a very positive focus for their revitalisation. And I think we ought to take advantage of this by making town centres a focus for employment in particular, which means commercial uses, including offices for small firms, you'd want to cultivate as being a town centre use. It is in your plan and in the NPPF, but it's actually creating a reality of it rather than just see it as a development management issue. It should be part of the positive planning for those centres. Also, we can use the plan to enable a strategy of producing 5 to 10 minute neighbourhoods. That is, working out that, like villages, the borough is a set of villages, making sure that people have easy access on foot to their day-to-day needs. And finally, I think we should be enabling employment and mixed use as renewal zones, and certainly Latimer Road is one like that. So I'm trying to see the positives, very hard in this, but maybe we just need to turn it round to our advantage. Thank you very much.
Chair, you're on mute.
Yeah. While Will's on mute, can I just thank the Kensington Society for their very helpful comments? I think I agree with pretty much everything they said, actually. And Amanda very persuasively used an example in my ward too, which didn't go unnoticed. And so it was an even more forceful point than I might have expected. Woodsford Square.
Thank you very much indeed. I think the thing that we're afraid of out of this plan is not the low-rise but higher density in Woodford Square. Is the sort of march of what is currently proposed over Tesco's or even higher, marching across the centre of the borough without any restraint. So I think my question would be to ask, how much would we be able to resist high-rise developments in conservation areas? I mean, is the promise to preserve some reflection on conservation areas solid, or is it permeable?
I'm sure John Wade can give us a bit more detail on that, although I'm certainly sensitive to that too. But were the Chelsea Society going to speak now, or did we want to pick up their comments later?
Well, sorry, I apologise. So, Paul Lever, you did ask, is it you or James Thompson who is going to speak tonight?
Hi. I'd like Paul to start if he could.
Okay.
Paul, if you'd like to start, you're most welcome. I apologise.
I won't repeat what Amanda. I won't repeat what Amanda and Michael have just said, because it reflects our views as well. Even more so, given the particular nature of the Chelsea part of the borough. Most of Chelsea, perhaps even all of it, is a conservation area, and the idea that there are plots of land waiting to be developed, it just doesn't correspond to reality. And in a way, I don't envy you having to respond to this government document, because from our perspective, the underlying reality of it is these are fine aspirations and may well work in much of the country, but they simply are not deliverable in Kensington, Chelsea, and certainly not in Chelsea. I mean, the idea that you deal with a lack of housing by focusing on the area where house prices are highest, because if you build more there, house prices will come down. As far as Chelsea is concerned, dream on. The idea that house prices here are going to come down in the foreseeable future, it's just, I don't think, it's unreal. And the problem we traditionally face in Chelsea is that we would love to see more affordable housing and indeed more social housing, although we do benefit from quite a lot of it. The problem is that most housing developments, as you know, which are undertaken, are developments of luxury housing, often bought by absentee owners as repository, as stores of value. And it's sometimes possible to squeeze a bit of affordable housing out of big developments, but it's at the margin. So I simply do not see how 3,285, if that's the figure, additional housing units could be produced in the borough. Certainly not if any significant portion of them were expected to come from Chelsea. So the Chelsea Society's advice to the government would be, as far as our area is concerned, don't start from where you've started. But I appreciate that's not an easy message for the council to deliver.
May I add to what Sir Paul has said? I'm very much in agreement with his view, and that already expressed by Amanda and by Michael Bach. I think the misunderstanding that's come through this legislation is a lack of understanding density. There's some mention in the document about gentle density, as if there was some tiny understanding of what was happening. But this is really a sort of Napoleonic view, rather than what we've always had in planning, which was a British common law built up over individual cases. And I have now been a convert to the old planning system, which is admittedly a total mess, like law is a mess, but it's born out of people having a look at difficult circumstances and then doing the best they can. So I think what one should do is have a robust statement, which will be true not only of London, but other urban centres, which is there has to be some legislative understanding that when you live in a high density borough, you are probably not going to be able to meet the housing targets without extraordinary efforts, which will probably be counterproductive. So, and I think, as Sir Paul says, this is a difficult message for you to bring forward, but I think it's the reality. And it leads to another discussion we've been having in the Chelsea Society, which is, should affordable accommodation be in Chelsea itself, or is there a case for the money being used much better somewhere else? And we're not settled on that. We have different views. But I think this particular proposal we've had put forward really underlines the dilemma. I think many people would see a case for wealthy urban centres to pay more into the planning system, but the idea they're going to be able to provide the housing without it being, in fact, used by other people who are going to pay more for it, I think is absurd. So I think we would have to help you in say, this is a good national perspective, but there must be a proper understanding that in areas which are already high density, and our own supported housing is about 24%, slightly above the London average, there must be some understanding of this. It must be allowed for and incorporated into the system. So that's my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we come to the point where committee members, would you like to ask some questions? Who should we go for first? Alison, is this a new question you've got up on the chat, or is that one from previous?
From the last one.
Right.
Yeah, no, just on this, I think absolutely with everyone on this. I think that it would be a huge disaster to have it marching through in tower blocks throughout the borough indiscriminately, and as ways of dealing with density that are architecturally in keeping with the area, particularly Chelsea. I'm very particularly interested in this and how it's going to pan forward, Johnny. How is this going to be taken forward, this document?
Well, we're going to submit a response to the government consultation before the 29th of the month, and we will continue to lobby very robustly privately and make much the same points that Amanda, Michael, Paul and James have made already tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I come back to my question, which I put up a little bit too early, which was the one where I understand there is some protection due to conservation areas, but how robust is that in the context of the new plan overall? In other words, can we resist effectively tower blocks in, as Sir Paul Lever and James Thompson have said, in Chelsea, when sites do, as they will become available. There are some sites, as we know, that might become available and have become available recently. The ones that are being built out just off the King's Road. So the question is, how robust is the new planning regime to resist tower blocks?
Yeah, I always feel bad inviting officers and not having them speak. So may I invite John Wade to intervene here?
Yeah. Okay. So the Planning Listed Building Conservation Areas Act will still be in force. So in conservation areas, there still will be, looking at any application, you will still have to take into account whether that application preserves or enhances the character or appearance of the conservation area. And that's a statutory duty that we will still have to undertake. So that will still remain in place, and that will still have to be addressed in any scheme and by any officer that's looking at a scheme. I think probably the thing that might change is that if we have a housing target that we can't meet, and we have a housing target that means that we can't produce a 5-year housing supply of land, then what it does trigger is basically two things. It basically triggers, in an appeal situation, for the inspector to take into account and give weight to the fact that we haven't necessarily met our housing target, and therefore there's a presumption in favour of sustainable development, which means that added weight would be given in any decision to the fact that we hadn't actually got a 5-year housing supply, or that we hadn't met our housing target. So clearly, if we get a housing target that's not achievable, then we're always going to be liable for that to happen. That doesn't necessarily mean that an inspector would therefore automatically allow the appeal, and I think that's an important thing to say, because there would still be a balancing exercise, but additional weight would be given to the fact that we hadn't met our housing target. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there will be a plethora of tall buildings in Chelsea at all, but an inspector would have to give added weight to that particular aspect of it. But they may well say it still doesn't preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area, and therefore, I'm going to dismiss this appeal. But it's the fact that there's more weight for that, which does make us more vulnerable in terms of decision making.
Okay, Charles O'Connor, I think you have your hand up.
Just a quick observation rather than a question, really, to say that I think it's a good proposed response, and clearly a lot of work's gone into it. Seems very considered and thoughtful and detailed. I don't know whether other local authorities all over the country will produce things as detailed, but I'd be surprised. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Charles. And I just want to echo my thanks to officers in this public forum too, because they really have gone above the call of duty in preparing this response.
Yes, I think I would also like to reflect that, because we have here our committee and lead member and the officers and the conservation and the sort of residents associations, Kensington and Chelsea, all singing on the same hymn sheet. And this is a good occasion in that respect, albeit in the face of a fairly big threat. So thank you to everybody for that. Now we have Mary-Therese Rossi, you've just put a queue up on the chat. Would you like to ask questions?
So Johnny, I mean, similar to what I said in leadership team, I'm worried about kind of taking the decision-making process away from elected members and also from residents. So under the new proposals, who exactly would grant the planning permission? Would it still be the council, planning committee?
I share your concern about community involvement, as I said, and I think where the decision is taken will depend on different zoning, but I'm sure officers can elucidate on that.
Yeah, I mean, it rather depends on, the different planning regime that will come forward for each zone. I think it's fair to say that the government's intention, and it's not a bad intention in principle, is to front load the planning system. I think the concern we have with it is that they've so front loaded it that once that initial work has been done in the local plan, then it's almost, and you've set the parameters for development, then there's little after that if a potential developer actually submits a scheme that's in accordance with those parameters. In terms of a decision, it's not a case as it is at the moment where sort of planning is more of an iterative process where you sometimes, you get a comment and schemes are amended. It's more of a fact that once that initial engagement is over, then there's a presumption in favour of development. And I think that's true certainly for growth and renewal. It's not quite clear how protection, the areas of protection, i.e. our conservation areas, will pan out on that. But it's all still very front loaded. So I can't really give you an absolutely definitive answer to that, I'm afraid. But it's pretty clear at the moment that the period of engagement seems to be limited to one period at the very start of the planning process. And certainly in terms of all those other engagement processes that we go through for planning applications and more within the local plan, it's not clear how that would happen. I think the expectation is that there will be less applications going to planning committee and more applications delegated to officers because the principal details would have already been agreed in the plan. I don't know how realistic in Kensington and Chelsea how that is actually, because that's not really, as I've said, we don't fit that type of planning process. So there's lots of questions here still to remain to be answered, I think.
Can I ask a supplementary on that? If it sounds as though, if I'm right, that there's a real focus on sharpening up the local plan as much as we possibly can. Is that correct?
Well, there is. I think again, if you think that in this borough, about a third of our development comes through windfall sites because we don't have, the larger sites available for development. So the idea that the government is that we will pick up all these sites through site allocations, and the problem is that we can't pick them all up through site allocations because they don't come through in that process. So yes, the local plan will have more site allocations in it, and yes, we will try and involve as much as we can the local communities in coming up and looking at those site allocations and providing the criteria for how they could come forward, looking at design codes. But it's not an easy thing to do, to be honest, and it's a huge challenge. And I think it will be incredibly important that we try and engage as much as possible within the local plan process. But I think it's fair to say that there's quite a lot that we can't do within the plan that we do pick up. So not everything can be covered in the local plan, but certainly the government's emphasis is to do more within the plan and front load much more. So there's much more certainty for any developer in moving forward with any scheme.
Whilst we're on the subject of the local plan, can I quickly plug the local plan issues paper, which is being consulted on at the moment? I know I'm speaking to the Kensington and the Chelsea societies and a few others on Wednesday, which I'm looking forward to. But I'm very happy to discuss that paper with them offline too, if that's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Could I make a comment?
Yes, please do. But if you could make it short, because we must keep moving on the timescale, I'm afraid.
I think in practice we're going to have very few allocated sites. We've got 9 at the moment, and if we get to 15, that would be quite a lot. The emphasis, I think, is going to change onto renewal sites or renewal areas, and I think I'm not talking about housing estates here. I can assure you, we can start focusing on our town centres, which is one of the types of area that is highlighted in the document. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't have any more questions, so I propose that we move on to item A6, update on greening SPD. Actually, I'm remiss. I must emphasise that if anybody wants to come back to the lead member, Johnny Thalasides, on this to put their comments to be added into the borough's comments, they need to be put forward by 9 a.m. Monday, the 26th of October to enable him to get them together by the 29th, which everybody's discussed as the date that comments have to go direct into government. So on A6, this paper provides an update on the work producing green supplementary planning document. I'd like to call on Johnny Thalcides and John Wade to speak to this item.
Yep. Thanks, Will. I think the update itself is probably fairly self-evident, but I suppose the key thing for me to flag is that we regard this as a priority piece of work. It forms a big part of the Vision Carbon Zero agenda that Jem's talked about earlier today, and we look forward to bringing forward a draft SPD. I think our ambition is to be as green as is humanly possible, so long as we ensure that things continue to be viable in this borough. So we are absolutely behind the green agenda broadly.
Thank you very much. There's 2 points I'd like to make before asking for questions from the committee. First of all, could we have sight as this committee of the draft as soon as possible, because it integrates into one of our major areas of study, which is going to be the 2030 commitment. And also, we would like to ask whether there's any flexibility on the timing framing. There's been some comment back to us as a committee about the fact that the consultation for this is running over the Christmas period. So we want to make sure that it A, gets out on time, and B, that it is well publicised, and that we do allow, when it says run into January, should we be talking about an 8-week consultation period, bearing in mind it's a holiday with COVID and all the rest of it, or how are we going to play this?
Well, normally our consultations run for 6 weeks, and I think the 8-week period is designed to mitigate the impact of the holidays. I suppose if the committee is so minded and asks for us to extend the consultation period further, then we could, but we wanted to get this adopted as soon as possible, precisely because it is such a priority for the council itself. So I suppose I'm looking to you for steer on that, but I'm keen to press on if we possibly can.
I take your point about balancing the two things. I think if we are going to go for it says the 8-week in paper here. It says 8-week consultation period in November, running into January 21. That's what's in the paper before us. That's fine as long as it goes out on time, that it is well publicised, and that we do have positive engagement as early as possible. I think that's really what I'm, because if it's well done and to the point and not just strictly by the letter, then people will feel that they're included. But it is unfortunate that we've got a mixture of Christmas, COVID, and a few other differences. But at the same time, you want to get this in place. So I think get the conversation going as early as possible. And I think a draft, an early draft would be useful for this committee to get stuck into, and then we can raise some of the issues and get them publicised.
Yeah, I'm happy to give an early draft to this committee, so long as it's slightly after I've seen an early draft. I may be able to preempt some of the comments from our amenity societies, because I'm happy to share a very early draft, so long as it's understood to be a draft, with them alongside the committee.
Well, I would welcome the opportunity as early as you can, Johnny, to get the key points that you're trying to grapple with in this greening paper for discussion with us and the amenity societies, so that we can come back with useful generic comments and not wait for the fine tuning of the wording of the draft itself. So I think early engagement would be good on this one.
Sure.
So if I could leave that comment. Now, do we have any comments? Paul, he was left the meeting. Now, I don't have any questions at this stage from anybody. Does anybody want to raise from the committee wish to raise an issue on this? James, is that you trying to speak?
A brief comment. I know that we have to fall in with government policies which already exist in terms of vehicles. I think when we get to the topic of parking within the borough, then I think we should, in addition to the issue of emissions, look at the length and size of the vehicles. Essentially, what you are doing as a council is determining who gets which space. And so I think we should have a policy regarding very large vehicles and not concentrate entirely on emissions, but you are actually rationing the space that is available for parking, and there should be some benefit to people who have smaller vehicles and shorter vehicles. That's all.
Thanks, James. That's a very helpful comment, and I'll take that away and talk about it with officers and with Jem if possible too.
Thank you. Right, let's pass on from a.
In fact, I suspect Jem's probably likely to introduce something along those lines. So I'll work on that with him. But we certainly are grateful for your point, James.
I totally understand, James. There are certain parts of Chelsea, but there are also certain parts of Notting Hill where wide vehicles in particular are particularly difficult.
The width of a car would be very much something you should look at. It's one borough protesting, but I think you could have an impact.
Yeah, but it's quite the borough.
Yes, I agree. Lead the way once again.
Can I hold the meeting to discipline, please, and move on to item 7, please?
Are there any comments from the committee on that?
I haven't got any on the chat, on the queue questions. No questions have been raised as far as I can see, and there's no questions from the committee. So thank you, Johnny, for that one. A7, the Broad Brompton supplementary planning document. So Johnny, could you lead us again, please?
I fear this is becoming a bit repetitive, Will.
Yeah.
But no, this is another big priority for the planning and transport department. The Royal Brompton is an enormously valued institution in the heart of Chelsea, and I note in your ward, Will, we will do absolutely everything we can to keep it in Chelsea. Part of that work is producing this SPD, which will be designed to safeguard and enhance the medical use on the site. We've also got a petition that the council has set up on change.org/save the Brompton. If anybody wants to sign and wants to atone for a previous error in not signing it, then now's their moment to act surreptitiously on that front. Just to say, we will again consult on this as appropriate. I'm hopeful that we can adopt it, right at the start of 2021, to coincide with the kind of merger that's being mooted. My ambition is certainly to adopt it this year, as previously set out, and I know this is an area of great interest for the committee, and I hope to work with it.
Thank you. It is in my ward, and I feel passionately about this, not just only from my own point of view, having campaigned now twice to keep it there. That's the Brompton. This is the third time that they've tried to leave the borough, and to Paddington Basin, then to North Hammersmith, and then now somewhere south of the river. It's not even in the northwest London medical planning area in the NHS. So some of the euphemisms about still being near to the heart of the clientele and all the rest of it just doesn't work. There is a tremendous synergy between this hospital and the Marsden, but also with the Chell West, and this has been borne out particularly during both the response to the Grenfell tragedy, but also during this pandemic that we're now suffering from at the moment. There have been innumerable cases that have been passed from one national expert centre to another, and the rate at which the staff have stepped up in the response to difficult circumstances has been incredible. So this is no way, the concern that we feel is in no way a reflection on our love of the staff who work at the Royal Brompton. And many of the staff in the Royal Brompton have been told at short notice about what is happening, and have not, I feel, been very well cared for, and that some of them have already decided that they're going to leave and go and work for other trusts. And so I understand recently that the Brompton was not able to put 2 of their theatres into operation because they didn't have enough nursing staff to do so. So it is really a bit of a disaster. In relation to this paper, though, specifically, I would like to ask whether the team has consulted with the Chell West Trust and also with the Imperial Group, which have large operations in that part of the world. I know that there's been mention of discussing things with the Marsden, but there's also been considerable work with the Chel West and with Imperial. And then allied to that, there's a mention of workshops. I'm not aware of any workshops myself at the moment, so could I be copied into when the workshops are going to be happening?
Yes, regarding the workshops, of course. And we will work with all of the world-class medical institutions in Chelsea and in the borough in order to best protect the Brompton.
Thank you very much. Now, does anybody wish to ask Councillor El Nagi, your hand is up.
Yes, good evening, Chair. Thanks so much, Johnny, for this paper and your team. And I actually I would like just to add further that this issue of Royal Brompton Hospital is a holistic approach, not just one singular planning. So it is in Will's ward and it is in our borough. Historically speaking, it's a fantastic institute, and we need all the effort to keep it here. And I really welcome the workshop to highlight the issue, and in particular paragraph 3.3, which is highlighting what the SPD is trying to do. So yeah, I mean, as a chair of the Adult Social Care and Health Select Committee, I strongly support this paper and the work, what you are trying to do and establish this whole picture to keep Royal Brompton in our borough, providing a solid case for to turn it again into a center of excellence for delivering top quality medical. So yeah, I would love to join that workshop as well and give it my full support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marwan. You're quite right to note that this is a cross-cutting priority for the council, and that the Adult Social Care Committee also has an interest in safeguarding medical use there. It's great to see that the opposition group is following the majority group in opposing this closure.
Can I clarify one thing also, Johnny? I had a note sent to me to say that the NHS has still not finally entered into agreement as to exactly what will happen.
Well, I think there are plenty of smoke and mirrors involved here, but the Brompton's current position seems to me to be clear, that they are agitating for a move, and it's incumbent on the local authority to fight that.
I mean, there are two parts to, well, two or three parts to this. There's the question of whether the trust does a link up with another trust, or rather a takeover by another trust, because I don't think it's a link up at all. And then the other thing is the physical move of the services. And there's a difficulty for Councillor Nanagi in some respects, because the Brompton seems to believe that they only have to consult on the movement of services, but not on the takeover of the trust. I don't know whether you have any further news on whether the trust takeover has happened, or is likely to happen soon, or has been finally agreed, or whatever.
I don't have particular insight there, but I think the responsibility to consult is a very important one. It's not just a sort of legal thing, it's also a moral duty to consult, because the communities in Kensington and Chelsea that benefited from the Brompton over a long period must be spoken to before anything changes there.
Well, I think that one of the other aspects of that is, and my understanding is, the land was originally given for the purposes of medical and community use, and therefore it's unfortunate that there's no legal agreement to that effect. That's only thing it can be used for. But I agree with you about the moral moral facets here. Now, if I could pick up on Councillor Rossi, have you put a question in here?
Yes, well, I was just going to say we had to actually take legal advice on that issue about whether they had to consult with people on the merger or acquisition, and the legal advice came back to us. This is what they said, they didn't have to, and the legal advice came back to us that they were correct. So they have agreed, the Brompton have agreed to come and speak, I think, to the ASC and Health Committee on the 19th of November. And my understanding is that, you know, we know what's going on, but a decision that is agreed by NHS England will happen between January and March next year. Having said that, I've heard from staff at the Brompton that they're already being talked about moving on, that they will be paid by Thomas's and Guys in January. But as far as I know from the trust themselves, they have said to us that between January and March.
Yeah.
It seems extraordinary. It seems extraordinary that remarks were made in an earlier discussion about a vision, then a strategy, then the sort of tactics to carry them out. And in this instance, you'd have thought that they'd work out where they wanted to do these services, that they'd ensure that the buildings are going to be built for them to be in, and that people could get there, etc. And then, if necessary, you join up the trusts. Whereas at the moment, we seem to be in a situation where the first item on the calendar is joining up the trusts, or the takeover of the trust, because it's not a joining up. And then there is still there is no substantiated business plan for the Thomas's building, as I understand it at the moment. No decisions are made on that. It's broadly in a scoping document, but it's got no money behind it, and no firm plan behind it. And it's going to be about 5 years before it could be available because of COVID delays, etc., at the very fastest. So
my guess would be, Will, that the reason they're going for the merger or acquisition first is because they don't legally have to consult about it.
Yeah.
And that's why they're doing that first. That's my way of reading it anyway.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cynical move, yeah.
Yeah, and can I welcome the Overview and Scrutiny Committee's renewed interest in the Brompton as an issue, and also the work of the Adult Social Care Committee too.
Yes, and to take your point earlier, Johnny, and I know that Mary-Therese, you'll give us some guidance on how to do this, but there seems to be a lot of interaction between Councillor Inagi's work and our work on this committee. And I think it'd be useful to have the OSC's involvement in this issue.
Yeah, no, I think this is ripe for scrutiny at every level within the council.
Right. I've now got a question from Amanda Frame. You wanted to raise.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question. Well, state one question. But first thing is that this is a classic example of why we have CK1, which is designed to protect social and community use. And actually, in terms of the planners, and John Wade's still here, I'd like to hear his statement in terms of how secure we can use CK1 to actually make the land use of the future required to be social and community, which may change the Brompton's attitude towards using it. The other is a question quite ambitious and possibly not. Michael Bach has just told me he's already tried this 5 years ago. For an application for an asset of community value on the land, on the buildings.
Right. Jonathan, would you like to come back on both of those points, please?
Yes. I think, as it says in the report, that we do have local plan policy CK1, and it is of use. However, as I pointed out, there's also the London Plan strategic policy about looking at health uses and looking at them holistically over London. So the concern is here that the Brompton will make a case that actually, if you look at it holistically on a pan-London basis, then the site they may have a good. Well, they're saying that they may have a better case to provide pan-London medical facilities away from this site. I think where the policy does help us, and it will come forward in the SPD, is that we will be looking, even if the Royal Brompton does move off this site, to not lose it for a social community use, particularly for health provision. So that's the whole idea about this SPD coming forward, that we're in the strongest position possible to keep this site for a deliverable health use, which hopefully would be of great public benefit if the Royal Brompton, do what they intend to do, which is to vacate the site. So I think the policy is useful, but it doesn't stop, obviously, the Royal Brompton moving, but it does help us in ensuring that any replacement use on the site should be, predominantly a health use. And the other point of the SPD is to make sure that something that comes forward is actually deliverable, because there's not much point us producing an SPD which actually isn't really viable. So we've got to make sure that anything we produce actually is realistic and can be brought forward on that basis. So that's the first point. Second point with asset and community value, yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't think we could keep the hospital use there. We couldn't make them do that. We could keep the use, the health use there. I must admit, I haven't gone through that in depth. So forgive me if I give you an off-the-cuff answer to that. I think we could, an asset and community value may recognise the use of a particular building, but I don't think, again, that it would necessarily safeguard losing the Royal Brompton. But let me think about that one, because I haven't given it any thought until you've actually raised that question. So that's just my initial view on that one.
I would like to point out the fact that you have mentioned in the report also, and in what you said, that you have been in contact with the Royal Marsden and the Institute for Cancer Research, because members will and of the committee will recall from previously that the Marsden, due to its lack of space due to the fire and rebuilding after their fire, had a big request that the Fulham wing at least should be something that they could acquire if the Brompton didn't need the overall space anymore. So it would seem to be a priority to enable that an international centre for cancer research and cancer practice, and also not forgetting the Imperial computing unit there on genomics and stuff like, which is all part of that unit, because I think that's why I said the Imperial College, but also the Imperial Trust, being two different things, medical trust, need to be consulted, and the Chell West, that there is a lot of interest. One of the other things that's of interest in the NHS context is there's a lot of circling around going on and redefinition of need and so on, and that the JOSH, which Councillor Nagy has attended, addresses the issue of the interests of the northwest quarter of London within the NHS world, and where Brompton is moving to is not even in the northwest London, and therefore it does beg the question as to how that need is going to be satisfied. So there are quite a few different tables at which this needs to be discussed, and I very much welcome Councillor Nagy being here and making a contribution today, because it immediately titrates into one of the areas of his committee. So
thank you, Will. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if we could, I think we've James Thompson. I've got your hand up. Is that previous or a new one?
It's just, if I may say, I strongly support your attempts to see what we can do there. We're losing the large prize, which is a medical campus in Chelsea. It's a pity we haven't put that together. We would strongly support any steps that can be done to maintain a community use and ideally a health use for that site. I haven't totally lost the idea we might somehow have a medical campus there, but that's certainly what our strongest wish was. And finally, thank you for inviting me to this. It's been very helpful and very instructive.
Well, it's been a pleasure to invite you and Sir Paul Lever, who's also left. And if you could pass on my thanks for him attending earlier on. I think you brought up a very useful point, and Johnny and Jonathan Wade, you might have another look at this concept of a medical campus as well, because I've heard some practitioners within all the hospitals in Chelsea still wishing to look at that concept. And it may be that new partners need to be brought in to enable that to happen, because we still have, even if over time the Brompton reduces the services it produces there, downsizes, or even, God forbid, leaves altogether, that there is an enormous attraction by the coincidence of various different specialisms that are there at the moment, and they are actively talking within the reconfiguration of Northwest London to see what can be brought to bear. So I think we should not lose sight of that concept. But if I could draw this particular item to conclusion and move us on, we have under A8 the update on Crest, including CCTVs and acoustic cameras. So if we could move on to A8. Now, under A8, Crest is the customer resident focused environmental services transformation, Crest for Salt. As an ongoing project to transform the environment enforcement and increasingly all street management services of RBKC. This is something that I've been passionate about for a very long time, as those of you from Chelsea in particular who participated in the first pilot, and then we had another one in North Kensington as well. Paper A8 provides an update on the progress of Crest work and the impact of COVID-19 on that work. And A8A outlines the work the council, pioneering work the council has been doing, introducing acoustic cameras to tackle excessive vehicle noise. Now, I would like to call on lead members and Tim Davis to comment on the report, and then we'll come to questions from the committee.
Thank you. Well, I think actually it's almost all of us, this report, because the acoustic cameras were a brainchild of Councillor Thalasitis and Councillor McVeigh. The community wardens obviously report to Councillor Will under community safety. The report itself, obviously, it shows how we are all linking together to address issues our residents face. I believe since the end of March, they have dealt with over 19,000 separate complaints and issues, which is truly phenomenal. I think it runs at about 110 issues per day, which is astounding, frankly, that they're able to deal with so many things. But it also, the report goes on to show exactly how the teams are gelling together over time. They've obviously had a spanner thrown into the works with COVID, but the fact that we have such a sort of well-positioned team means they've been able to reach across the various teams to go out and deal with the rules around 10 p.m, getting our businesses up and running, all the sort of licensing and enforcement issues that go into that. And the whole report really is testament that the teams are working together, and it's a really positive step forward for the borough.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'm glad to hear so much progress has been made, and in fact, since I received this paper, I've had a briefing on what was called the dashboards, but actually it's a whole new tech with regard to mapping the activities on the street. I think there are really three questions that I'd like to ask. One is, I hope on the agenda for the future, or question of when on the agenda for the future, will there be a more positive link up with customer services, which is, according to a lead member paper, going through a big investment with regard to improving its computer system. Now, I understand the existing computer system is going out of service next spring, and therefore there's an urgency to bring the new one in. It would be a great shame if this new computer system was just filled with the existing questions on and ways of doing things on customer services. And I would urge the CREST team and the which now includes wardens to get involved in showing how these different backup systems could work. We still don't have a system across the borough that's equal to what Aylesbury as a district authority had about 3 years ago when Sue Harris and myself and several other officers went and visited them. The second thing is that I think there's a lot more progress that could be made with regard to the representatives we have on the street. We have a trial, in effect, of wardens. We have a small number of wardens across the borough, roughly equal in number to our park police. We have a trial, as stated in the paper, of NSL officers from that organisation working in looking at how they can multitask. And with the changes to the way in which parking permits are not displayed on vehicles anymore, maybe we could look in an imaginative way of integrating the parking wardens, who are considerably more numerous, into this fold as well. And then finally, my question I'd like to ask about the acoustic cameras is, could officers please confirm or not, for them to be effective, we have to have a PSPO. It's a radically transforming tech. I've seen the demonstrations. It's fantastic, but it doesn't seem to work as a business model unless we have a PSPO and are able to go for fixed penalty notices as opposed to down the CPN route. So those are my three questions: linking up the customer services, linking up with other officers on the street, and acoustic cameras. Look at, maybe we need a PSPO across the borough.
Thank you, Will. I'll defer to officers on the acoustic cameras and perhaps even to Johnny. I would say linking up to customer services is something we are obviously really important that we get right. We have worked with them quite a lot over the summer with regards to the virtual parking permit, because obviously it's gone digital. But going forwards, they do have their new customer access strategy, which I thought was a wonderful document and really forward thinking of how they're going to embrace technology in the next few years. Obviously, there's always IT issues. That's just a normal part of life. But I'm confident the team will be able to move us to whatever system we have to go to, whilst adding the features that we're keen to see. And perhaps Tim or Johnny, if you want to take the acoustic camera.
Yeah, I'm happy to shoot about acoustic cameras. Yeah, it is fantastic that we've been able to get it off the ground, and lots of support from councillors to make it happen. And to reassure you, Will, we are using the PSPO that's in existence anyway, and we are moving straight to fixed penalty notices to the vehicles that are breaching the PSPO. Interestingly, last Monday, I think we'd hit 188 breaches of the PSPO, as in...
That's, I think it's now 450. I got an update today. So yeah,
it's doubled. Yeah, no, it's doubled since then. I think one of the little issues is it's picking up the blue light service, and they're re-engineering the software to filter out the blue lights, because at the moment one of the officers has to filter out all the blue lights before we start going for the vehicles that have breached the PSPO. But it's very early days, and we'll be starting to send out fixed penalty notices in literally in the next few days.
Tim, can you confirm that the question is, I'm delighted that that's working well, and it's doubled since you gave me a briefing a few days ago. But the question is this, is that if we want to use this revolutionary tech in another part of the borough, my understanding is that unless we have a PSPO for that part of the borough,
that's correct. This
is not a workable model, and we need to therefore not raise expectations, because as I understand, please could you clarify? Because if I understand that if we don't have a PSPO in place, we cannot use FPNs. We have to go a CPN route, and that does not work. Now, is that true or not? Could we have a factual response from Tim, please?
Okay, in order to serve a fixed penalty notice immediately for a breach of the noise, the revving, the accelerating, etc., that we have to have a PSPO in place. PSPO has to come about due to evidence gathered to prove that it's required for a certain area. So yes, you're correct. In other parts of the borough, although we could use the technology, the CPN route would be the only way we could enforce it, and it wouldn't work because it wouldn't be continuing. Each time we'd end up just sending everyone warning letters all the time. So we would have to go down a PSPO route in other parts of the borough in order to use the same technology. That is correct.
Right. Okay. Now that's not to say that it wouldn't be worth sending out warning notices, but it would be a cost to the council rather than the current situation where you're actually able to recover the cost, which is the beauty of having the PSPO and the FPNs working together. So I think I think it'd be it's an excellent success. It's a use of an innovative technology which was built specially for the borough after the failure of the national trial to go ahead and prove a concept. That we've taken the initiative, we've got it to work, and it works brilliantly. But what we mustn't do is to raise expectations to our residents that it can be applied with ease at every part of the borough, because I know there's an enormous appetite for it to be applied across other wards. But we do need to be cautious about raising expectations. If we can find a different legal route around that or have a PSPO across the whole borough, then let's go for it, because I think there's lots of other places where noisy motorbikes and so on would love to have this tech.
My understanding is also,
Chairman?
Can I come in actually, Mr. Chairman?
Right. Okay, Mr. Johnny, if you'd like to come back first.
So my understanding is that failure to comply with a CPN can lead to an FPN, and I think although there might be a cost to the council, a fairly modest one in sending letters, I think it's still worthwhile and can be effective, to use your word, in other parts of the borough. So I would just defend the use of it elsewhere, whilst being mindful of the fact that we should be careful about managing expectations.
Okay. Now, Laura, you wish to get Councillor Laura Round.
Thanks. Sorry, my signal just went a bit funny. I hope you can hear me. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up and see how long the process is to apply for a PSPO, or as our chairman just said, applying it across the borough would obviously be the most straightforward way of doing it, or maybe not straightforward way, but that would obviously make sure every area is covered. And also on the back of that, just obviously a huge fan of the acoustic cameras, and as Johnny knows, looking forward to seeing them hopefully soon in my ward in Pembridge as well. But with regards to just speed more generally, what are the plans to enforce the 20 miles per hour when it comes in? Just to come back of that.
Tim, do you want to cover the PSPO point, and I can come back on speeds?
Certainly. To be quite honest, I don't know how long it would take us. We would need some evidence, and then we'd have to go about doing it. And it took quite a while to get the PSPO into Knightsbridge. I can certainly come back to you, but I don't have. I couldn't give you a figure a number of months right now. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, if we could see a timescale and process to see what would be involved, that would be very useful.
Yeah. I think that's a helpful point, and I would suggest that officers prepare a quick note to be added to the minutes, hopefully retrospectively, so that we can answer the question publicly. On speeds, the only body that can enforce speeds are the police. So to be honest, there's an extent to which this is more of a nudge than anything else. That's not to say it can't be effective. Where we've piloted 20 mile an hour elsewhere in the borough, we've seen the speeds fall by 10% and the average speed fall by 60%. So I think it's worthwhile. But I think introducing speed cameras when we can neither enforce nor do we collect the sort of the money, as it were, where there are fines, it would be sort of not something that we're actively considering at the moment.
Another part of the nudge has been the trial of the devices that show the speed when you're going towards them.
Yeah.
Have we got any evidence as whether it's been successful? Because I've always thought they were particularly good, especially the French for once have come up with some very good ones where you get smiley face if you're doing the right thing in green, and you get a frowning face if you get in red. I've seen them often in France all over the place, and I'm surprised the ones that we got here just purely put up the speed with no fun anyway.
I don't have any data to hand, but you're right. We have piloted speed indicator devices. They're pretty cheap, broadly speaking, so they're the kind of thing we can do quite quickly.
Right.
The first one was on Barby Road, and I know there's one on Oakley Street where Jem represents as well.
But I'd urge us to get some feedback as to whether they are that kind of nudge is working or not, because they seem to be quite widely used across other parts of the UK. And as I say, particularly the best examples I think are in France, whether they've got a different graphic engineer. Okay, we don't have any other questions on A8. So A9, sorry. We have culture plan update. If we could move the slide on, thank you. Brilliant. So on A9, as members will be aware, the Council has introduced a one-year plan for culture in response to the pandemic situation and intends to follow to the four-year long-term cultural plan. We've made a very positive response to the one-year plan because we felt that it was exactly the right thing to do, and encouraged the officers, having put that into effect, to carry on with producing the multi-year plan. Now, there is actually a missing link. In the paper, it mentions that the consultation that was given to this committee back earlier in the spring, updating on the development of the longer term plan. Now, the fact of the matter is that I'm new to the committee and also as chairman, and many of our members are new as well. So I would request if officers could find a way of providing a briefing to this committee of what in covering the points that were made back in the spring, updated of course to current thinking. Because we do not have that back history on the four-year plan, although it may be on the record in minutes somewhere. So that's the first request. Then I think also that the consultation period, again, is mentioned, is over Christmas, and I've had representations from one amenity society to see whether that could be stretched. And also that we would like, as a committee, to be involved in all stages of the consultation rather than just at a later stage. So in other words, when the draft four-year plan is created at the end of October would seem to be the next step. So if we could be involved from that point onwards. So who would like to lead?
Chair.
Emma Will, would you like to?
Do you just want me to address those points? Because and officers are here and probably have far more useful interventions. I think the paper is pretty self-evident, and as you say, it's an update. I think what happened in the spring was, obviously there was a sort of hiatus in the scrutiny process and a change of chair, but there was also quite a significant rewrite of the paper because it was brought forward originally as a 5-year plan, and the COVID happened, and then we felt it really couldn't go out as it was, and a lot of work sort of that changed. So I think that's why the comments were never responded to. I think in fairness to Caverna Cornwall, she did the work, but it was different, and it was a different group of people. So that was the disconnect. But I'm sure we can feed back. In terms of extending the consultation, if the timeline will allow, and I'll let Terry and Verena answer that one, more than happy to do so. And we absolutely, we actually had a conversation with about 5,000 different people before we did the year one. It's been going on for some months. But it is an iterative process. We had a really big culture conversation a couple of weeks ago. We had 120 people apply to come on that. And so the more feedback, the better. Everyone owes this. I don't know, Terry, Verena, do you want to address those points?
Can I make one comment about that? The cultural conversation that you just referred to was very innovative, and it was a pleasure to participate in it. and I thought it came up with an excellent response. And I think it's something that we could all learn from in the technique. I mean, the whole way the tech was handled and the different conversations were handled were really good. And it's certainly something we'd like to support as a committee. So thank you very much to everybody and all the officers who were involved in that. But
thank you, Chair. Well, we certainly want to be innovative around culture.
It was brilliant because he brought in so many different aspects of the. I met all not just individuals I didn't know, but organisations and types of organisations I didn't know of across the borough, and I've lived here all my life. So it was a great thing to participate in, and I think we should do more of it. But sorry, I've cut across Terry to Oliver. You were asking him to come in now.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Will. So as Councillor Will said, back in March, when we were originally going to launch the 5-year plan at the beginning of the spring this year, it all got delayed, obviously, because of COVID, and we needed that new approach. So the 5-year plan the draft of that was sent to the then Environment Select Committee, and we can potentially resend that for you. The next stage is set out in the report. What we want to do is look at creating that 4-year plan. So building on the success of the 1-year plan, we want to, we started with the creative conversation, which you just spoke about, and glad that was very popular. We want to then collate the findings from that, bring that together into the 4-year plan, and then we will circulate that around to the Environment Select Committee, but also do a much wider external consultation with cultural providers, practitioners, our market traders, residents, councillors, so as many people's views on that as possible. We'll collate that together and then again pull that together into the kind of final draft, which we will then again circulate to the Environment Select Committee for kind of final sign off. And we aim to have that kind of live for late spring, summer. So the timetable in the report, we're going to push back a little bit just to allow some extended consultation, just to note. So basically the current 1-year plan, because it was launched back in July, that will kind of take us to July, so we want to have the new plan ready just to take over from there. So just to let you know that time frame in the report possibly has been pushed back slightly, and we can look at extending the consultation.
Thank you very much indeed. I think the comment that was made from the Amenity Society was not so much the length of the consultation, it was the fact it was over Christmas. But if it's going to get pushed back a little bit, then we should be able to hit that spot. Yeah. Thank you very much. I don't have any questions as such for anybody. Anybody wish to raise a question now to officers, or should we move on to the next item? So thank you, Terry and Emma Will, very much indeed for that. I would like to move on to A10 and just make the announcement that due to a request from TfL, the paper A10 on e-scooters has been withdrawn from this meeting. They will come back to a future meeting, but they are not yet ready to deal with some of the issues that they've had raised internally within TfL. So this is no disrespect to our officers, but we've been asked by TfL to pause on that item. So Parks Landscape Services Contract Tender A11 sets out the processes undertaken for the procurement of Parks and Landscape Services Contract, which is due to begin on the 1st of April 2021. This contract has been tendered in 2020 and will be let for a period of 10 years. The key decision report for contract award is listed for decision by leadership team on 9th of December 2020. The Select Committee is asked to make comment. Could I ask on Councillor Will and Ulash Korea to introduce the subject? We will have the paper and all read it, but if you could just raise the key points. Thank you.
Again, I will be brief. It's been a long meeting, and I think this is actually a very self-explanatory paper. And thank you to all the officers who've done so much work on this re-procurement. These are always very, very labour-intensive. I think just 2 points to highlight. We did do, again, a consultation before we got going with this process, so it very much reflects feedback we've had from users of our parks who this year more than ever, I think, have appreciated those parks. And I think there's various things, new things that are going to be in it, and Lulish can take you through those. But the most important one probably for me is that we will, of course, be moving to a London living wage in this contract, and I think that's very important. I'm going to stop there and hand over to Ulash or Terry, whoever wants to say anything more.
Ulash.
Good evening, Chair. Thanks, Emma.
Thanks
so as Emma says, it's been a long time coming. It's going to be a labour-intensive process. We've worked hard. I'd just like to highlight a few other, I think, key benefits. I've been around a long time, it's obviously needed. We need to re-procure the contract. But I think some of the things I'd just like to highlight in terms of positives for the spec will be things like better use of technology and contract management. And this is quite pertinent because, we're living in a different age, with Twitter and all sorts of things. And I can think of an example just about a month ago when somebody got locked in a park at midnight and councillors knew about this through Twitter. So technology has really moved on. So this will help in terms of complaints monitoring, reacting quickly and being more transparent. We've also got targeted locally employment initiatives. We want to employ local people. Improvements in horticulture. We're going to have 2 horticultural apprentices recruited each year. The standards should be better, better engagement for friends of groups, and also sustainable volunteering, which is also another key important area which we don't always highlight enough, in my opinion. There's other benefits, but I won't go on, like online sports booking, etc. But those are just some of the ones that I'd like to sort of emphasize.
Okay, could I support a point that Councillor Will was making, that parks are a very important part of the borough. They have been held in high esteem for a very long time, not only within the borough but across London. You look at the number of awards they've won and the reputation we generally have. However, during COVID, I think the parks have proven even more vital contribution to the community and health and well-being. And I hope that the parks group of officers have consulted with public health, adult social care and FCS, because if we let our parks slip through budgetary pressures, those services will get direct costs brought on them due to a reduction in the health and well-being of our residents and visitors across the borough. So I think having a holistic approach to budgetary control across the council, making sure that what in the past has been seen an excellent service and almost a bit of a luxury in some respects, is now proving a hard-nosed financial support to the well-being of the borough, and is helping to helping to provide and constrain the costs to other services, be it schools, or the health of our younger and older population, and the mental well-being of the whole of the population. So it's an integral part of what we do, and it should be seen as that. And Emma, I hope that you would resist and be supported by your fellow lead members in resisting any budgetary cuts beyond a reasonable prudence in this area.
Let me assure the committee I will do more than resist any cuts to our parks. But in fairness to lead member colleagues, I think there is it's acknowledged by everyone that parks have been absolutely vital during lockdown, and we really need to look after them in the way that they have looked after us during COVID. So I hope I can reassure everyone on that point. I think I've got a question, Chair.
Okay. Let's have a question. We have, I'm afraid it's Erin Oretti.
Thank you, Chair. Not a question really, just a comment and a point. Thank you, Emma, for assurance about the budgetary concerns. But let me thank you and the park staff, especially during the pandemic. We've got a lot of positive comments from the local residents about how important were the park during the crisis, and how well the park really managed to, enable their well-being and get some fresh air and relax, and probably some of the very good positive comments from the local residents. So thank you for all the job that you've done during the crisis. And Ulash as well, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Aretti. And Chair, if I may, I would love for you to minute all of our thanks, I think, to both Parks Police in particular, who had the very difficult job of trying to keep everyone happy and maintain social distance, and obviously the staff who maintain the parks, and Ulash and his team as well. They were flat out really trying to keep it all going, and I think they did fantastically.
I would be more than happy for it to be minuted, and I think we should also minute our thanks to you, because I've witnessed at first hand both you and Ulash in Dove House Green recently, sorting out a complex subject with a local developer, local residents, and everybody went away happy at the end of that meeting, as I understand it. So thank you very much indeed, and it's much appreciated the work that's been done by you, your colleagues. I'm glad you're supported by your fellow lead members, and you've got our support from this committee, and also to relay all of our thanks to all of the officers who are involved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that item. I think that brings item A11 to conclusion, and that leaves us with item A12, which is our work programme for the year. Now, I am aware of the time that we're at, and as has been previously said, we have had a long meeting. Now, I've spent quite a lot of time following the OSC agreement about the general areas of what we should be doing, namely that we should be looking at the Council's commitment to carbon zero, and we should be looking at the way in which the services for street management and customer services are joined up in the council, particularly in relation to streets and all the appropriate disciplines with that, including planning. The joint working we will do with the Housing and Communities Select Committee on Healthy Homes. We'll be focusing on the environmental side of that subject, including fuel poverty. And then, as has happened, really, it was flagged at the time of the OSC, but it's grown in importance, has been witnessed tonight, the whole area of planning and the changes that the government is consulting on through the white paper at the moment, and how that happens and works its way through. So effectively 4 areas, and the question that I've been discussing with Ryan McGowan and Jackie Hurd is to how we should manage that over the year. So on the first one, the general idea is to focus on 2020-30 and what the council will be doing in its own house to get its own house in order over the next 8.5 to 9 years, which is a very short time frame, particularly when you consider the 10,000 housing units that roughly we're responsible for that need to be brought into that area, together with the new build programme that Kim Taylor-Smith is looking at very assiduously at the moment with his officer colleagues. And so the way in which I've been following that up in detail in the interim has been to attend the Environment and Sustainability Strategic Board, which has been described tonight. It pulls together all the elements of the council. I think there are a few that we have not appreciated enough yet, things like procurement, because if we spend money on adult social care procurement, we incur carbon costs by doing that, maybe via contractors or by helping to co-fund with voluntary organisations and such like. And it'll be interesting to see how the consultant who's looking at the carbon zero approach for the next 10 years in-house will address that particular area. But in terms of the way of working, rather than handing this subject area over to one chairman who would have an impossible job to do, what we've decided to do is to break this subject down into a number of sub areas. So I have response from most of colleagues on this committee that they will deal with one or more of the areas that I've mentioned to them over the last few days. And that we that's Ryan, McGowan and myself, will be supporting each one of you to work your area up. And we want to try to have an interim report by the end of the year or early in the new year. And then a final report towards the end of the year, probably after a more public consultation. The second area, which is to do with joined up street management and customer services. I'm having a briefing with the new director of customer services later this week to see how far that conversation has gone from their point of view. I know they're going through a difficult re-enablement of their computer backup. So we'll have to see what the time frame is and an exact shape of that. So I'll be coming back with a report at the next of these meetings on how we will structure that one. The working with Housing Communities Select Committee on Healthy Homes, Councillor Kasim Ali and I are going to be involved, and I'm looking for a volunteer from my community Select Committee to work on that. Probably we need one councillor from each of our parties in that, and I think fuel poverty and how we actually get the existing housing stock that's in a poor some of it, not all of it, some of it which is in poor condition, up to a fit condition, but also to deal with the fuel poverty aspects, but also to deal with environmental sustainability. And then I think on these areas, particularly on planning, I know that my deputy has flagged planning as an area that he wants to major on. So I'm going to ask Charles if he would lead on our response or our input on the planning consultation, because we have a white paper deadline at the moment, but there's also going to be further consultation once that white paper gets developed, and then the consequence changes that we're going to have within the borough organisation to respond to that. So that is the general layout of the way forward. A fast-acting report on carbon 2030, a slightly longer term, but before the end of the year, report on the services, a working alongside Councillor Kasim Ali and his Housing and Communities Select Committee, and then a focus through Charles O'Connor on the planning response. Other items such as Brompton SPD, Greening SPD, and etc. will be taken by officer report updates at meetings. But that's the way in which we've scoped our work going forward. So without going through in detail, name by name, as to people who volunteered today, and we need to get some detail and some overlaps in terms of what people want to do, so we're going to have to do a bit of work over the next week to sort out. I propose that as the plan going forward. So can I have the agreement of my fellow councillors in committee as to that's the way that we structure our work going forward, because we have to, under the rules, I understand from Jackie and Ryan, that we have to make a decision as to how we're to proceed with our programme, but that's the way in which we propose to do it. So if there are any questions from committee members, or can I have your agreement that that's the way we go forward? Does everybody agree to that?
Agreed.
Yep, agree.
Thank you very much indeed.
Agreed.
Councillor El Naghi, you were the only member I wasn't able to speak to today, so perhaps offline we could have a discussion about exactly what aspect of this you would like to get involved in. That would be
no problem.
Great, excellent, good.
Cheers.
And I know there are some overlaps with health and your committee's work as well. We've touched on that with Brompton So we need to clear the lines on those as well. So thank you very much. Okay, if everybody's agreed, that's a good working way of working forward. I think we've finished the business for tonight, so I've got a question from Tom McCoggan on behalf of Councillor Ali. Is that right?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's not a question, just a quick comment. Councillor Ali called me during the meeting. He intended to be here tonight, but he's been called away, and so just to send his apologies and say that he's looking forward to working with you on the joint areas.
I attended his meeting and they agreed that we would work together, and I said to him that as soon as I had the support of my members, that we would get together in the first instance, he and I and Ryan McGowan, who supports both of our committees, to scope out what it is that we're going to do, and then we will want to draw in 1 or 2 members from each of our committees to make sure that whilst we have slightly different briefs, objectives, that we do it in a coordinated way. But I think there's every chance that we can work well on this. There's lots of work to do on the housing, and it's really a question of finding out how the excellent officers who are forging ahead, particularly on places like Lanc West, and there's 1 or 2 examples in the housing association sector as well, there's good exemplars of how to move forward and how we can bring that into a wider discussion of, because the implications for the HRA, for instance, on the financial side of this are quite enormous. So that all of that will need to be addressed. But thank you very much indeed for relaying Councillor Ali's input. And unless anybody's got any other business, I propose that we close the meeting, and I'd like to say thank you very much to everybody for participating tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.